Okay, welcome to chapter 21, the reproductive system. Okay, so the reproductive system is designed to allow for reproduction, meaning making a baby. And so we're going to look at the male reproductive system first and then the female reproductive system. So we're going to go ahead and go through the anatomy of the testes. Their job is to produce sperm. Okay, this is a cross section of the testes, and then the testes are held inside of a specialized sac of skin and smooth muscle tissue. And what it does is it actually maintains the testes at a lower temperature than the rest of the body. Inside, so if we were to look at the cross section, you would see these tubules. And okay, see how they're windy, right? Those are called the seminiferous tubules, and this is the actual location where sperm is produced. Okay, so if we follow these tubules around, so they're in little nets and networks, and then they connect over here. See how they're all connected here, here, here. All right, so they're connecting to this structure called the epididymis. And it's going to, oops, my pen's not drawing, the epididymis. Okay, the epididymis wraps around and turns into the vas deferens. Okay, so both of these are, once sperm is produced in the seminiferous tubules, they will travel through the epididymis and the vas deferens, and they're stored here, and then at some point they're released through the vas deferens, where it enters the ejaculatory duct. Okay, so this is another angle of the male reproductive system. Of course, there's two testes, right? There's the epididymis right there, and then this is the vas deferens, even though here they're calling it the ductus deferens. Okay, so it's got a couple of names. And ultimately, the route of sperm is going to be from the seminiferous tubules, okay, past the epididymis, the vas deferens. And then I want to look at the rest of the anatomy right here, this structure. This is the urinary bladder. And underneath the urinary bladder, there's the prostate gland. Okay, and then there's other glands here. These are called the seminal vesicles. Okay, there's another, this is the bulbourethral gland. And then this is the urethra. Okay, so the route of sperm would technically be from the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis, to the vas deferens, to the ejaculatory duct, and then out through the urethra. Okay, so these accessory glands, they have a job. Their jobs vary, so let's discuss, but ultimately their job is to help the sperm to survive and succeed in fertilization. So the seminal vesicles, right there, okay, these secrete fructose. Fructose is sugar. And why do we need sugar? We need sugar for energy. Okay, energy for the sperm to be actually motile. So that's the energy source that's used here is fructose. Okay, and then of course that's for cellular respiration. Okay, the prostate gland. The prostate gland sits right under the urinary bladder, and basically it secretes a alkaline fluid that raises the vaginal pH, which allows for more successful fertilization. Okay, the bulbourethral gland secretes mucus, and it cleanses the urethra. All right, looking closely at the seminiferous tubules, this is the location of something called spermatogenesis. Now, you might have seen this term early on when we talked about mitosis and meiosis. And ultimately, if we were to take one little tiny tube and take a cross section of it, we would see specialized cells. One in particular called the Sertoli cell. And then out, this is one tubule. And then on the outside, these are called interstitial cells. Okay, so now Sertoli cells, their job is to provide nourishment and support for the sperm cells. So in this picture, okay, this purple region, there's a nucleus, that's a Sertoli cell. And what's going on here is pretty straightforward. So sperm is being produced by meiosis 1, meiosis 2, and then we end up with 4 haploid gamete cells, and then they're going to mature into full sperm cells. All right, so the Sertoli cells are there to support and nourish the sperm production. Okay, the sperm anatomy is necessary for the full understanding of the system. Okay, trying to zoom out, but it's not working. All right, so let's start with the top, the tip. Okay, this is called the acrosome. The acrosome contains enzymes that assist in fertilization. So what that means is when a sperm meets an egg, there are enzymes here that are going to help break down the egg's membrane and allow for fusion and fertilization. So that's one thing. Right behind is the head, and that's going to carry all of the chromosomes. So it should have 23 exactly. Okay, this little structure right here is called the midpiece, and see how it's red? Well, it's got these red structures right there, there, there. They're kind of in a line. Okay, all of those are filled with mitochondria. And mitochondria, remember, make energy, produce energy. And remember, mitochondria, they perform cellular respiration, breaking down glucose and oxygen and making ATP energy. Obviously, the sperm are going to need tons of energy because they are motile. And in this case, they're not using, they'll use glucose, but they have a direct supply of fructose, the sugar fructose, for energy. Okay, and then of course they have their tail, which allows them to propel themselves forward, and aka the flagella. All right, next are the interstitial cells. The interstitial cells have a huge job. They make testosterone. All right, so the production of testosterone is going to happen inside of the seminiferous tubules, and even deeper in there in these little tiny cells in the testes called the interstitial cells. That is their job, to make testosterone. Okay, the amount of testosterone will also determine the amount of sperm and the rate of sperm formation. So testosterone has a direct correlation with the effects of male reproduction. Okay, now all of this is actually really controlled by the brain. So the regulation and release of hormone, the production of hormone, the production of sperm. This is not something that occurs, without regulation. In fact, it's one of the most highly regulated systems. Well, I shouldn't say that. They're all very regulated, but either way, it's pretty sophisticated. So what's going on here is this. Let me zoom in. Okay, so we're talking about, organs that are far away from the brain, but it doesn't matter. The brain is the boss, remember? And so inside, we're zooming in on this part of the brain, which is the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. That's the hypothalamus. Remember the H thing? H for hypothalamus. Okay, so let's zoom out. All right, so this is how it works. The hypothalamus releases a hormone called GnRH. GnRH is gonadotropin releasing hormone. Okay, and that hormone will move to the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, the pituitary gland is got a direct connection with our vascular system. So if it wants to release hormones into the blood, they can enter the cardiovascular system and go anywhere. And they will go to the location they belong in and bind with the correct receptors in that location. All right, so what does the anterior pituitary gland do in turn? It's going to release two hormones. One is called LH, luteinizing hormone, and FSH. And these are sent to the testes. And in turn, LH is going to stimulate the production of testosterone. FSH is going to be involved in this stimulating the production of sperm cells. Okay, and then also something else called inhibin is produced as well. Inhibin, think of inhibition. Now, this can't just go on and on forever. We can't just have endless sperm and endless testosterone. That's not good. So once there's enough testosterone through a negative feedback loop, the testosterone will turn off the release of LH by signaling the anterior pituitary gland, or it can actually go straight to the hypothalamus and block GnRH if necessary. So it has both options. So they actually are self-regulating through a negative feedback loop. FSH is similar in that sense. Okay, it releases sperm, or it instructs the production of sperm. And then when there's enough, the hormone inhibin will signal the pituitary gland or the hypothalamus and tell them to stop, that there's enough. Okay, so your brain and your endocrine system, which is technically part of this. These guys, the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary gland, your hormones, that's part of the endocrine system. Now, they have a delicate, significant job. Anything that deviates from the norm, too much, too little, anything that is just slightly off of homeostasis is going to have catastrophic effects on the individual. So we need this perfect balance of homeostasis. Remember that term? Okay, so your brain and your endocrine system are directly involved. And this is just another this is just a sketch of what I just showed you guys, where the hypothalamus is releasing GnRH, anterior pituitary releases LH, FSH, and it shows a little bit more. It's showing that FSH is going to specifically interact with these Sertoli cells, and LH is specifically going to interact with, they're calling them Leydig cells, but let me just go back to Where are they? Leydig and interstitial cells are actually the same thing. And I know they crisscross terms from time to time, but just keep that in mind. And then ultimately, the Sertoli cells will allow for spermatogenesis, but at the same time, they're going to make inhibin, that hormone that's going to inhibit through a negative feedback loop the production of these hormones down here. Well, specifically FSH anyways. The Leydig cells or the interstitial cells are responsible for testosterone production. Testosterone will enhance spermatogenesis, and then it has a negative feedback regulation on itself. It can block GnRH, it can block LH as well, depending on where it decides to target, whether it decides to act on the hypothalamus blocking GnRH or the anterior pituitary gland blocking LH. All right, next is the female reproductive system. So the female reproductive system is, from the beginning, it's pretty straightforward. The female gonads, or the ovaries, there's two, okay, one on each side, and inside of the ovaries is where oogenesis occurs, which is the production of an egg, also known as an oocyte. Okay, ovulation is when the oocyte that is being produced ruptures out of the ovary and enters the uterine tube. All right, so if we look at this closely, here's the ovary. Okay, there's these little fimbriae, and the ovary connects to the uterine tube, also called the oviduct, also called the fallopian tube. Okay, and then that connects to the uterus. This is the uterus. Okay, and then right underneath is the cervix, and then the vagina. Okay, so this is a side view of the reproductive system. And so there's the there's the ovary, there's the oviduct, and then there's the uterus. See how it's hollow right there? And then you can see the cervix right there in this one. And okay, I think that's everything in this particular image. Well, I guess it's important to note there's the urinary bladder, by the way. All right, so what do the ovaries do? Well, their job is to produce an oocyte, which is an egg, and release the oocyte. They also secrete hormones, the hormone estrogen and the hormone progesterone. Okay, the oviduct is also known as the fallopian tube. It connects the ovary to the uterus, and when fertilization occurs, so when a baby is made, fertilization is going to happen in the upper 2/3 of the oviduct. So that's just a fact. All right. The uterus. The uterus is this, they call it a pear-shaped organ because it is. It does look like a pear, so it's this pear-shaped organ, right? And it's hollow. And so its job, the purpose of the uterus is to house a baby, to house a fertilized egg and allow a baby to grow. So let's say that, let's say there's a pregnancy here. All right, so this is how it's going to work. Okay, so fertilization, first of all, the egg has to be produced. Okay, it's going to rupture out of the ovary and move into the oviduct. Fertilization will occur in the oviduct. And let's say at that point, when fertilization occurs, then that's a zygote. That means that is a fertilized egg Okay, now it can't stay in the oviduct. It is going to move into the uterus and implant itself into the endometrium. That is the inner layer of the uterus. Okay, and then that is where the implantation should occur in a healthy pregnancy, and then at that point, there's more to the pregnancy. I'm going to talk about hormones and that sort of thing later, but this is just anatomical. So that's the location of implantation of the zygote and where the baby's going to grow. It will be housed and grown inside of the uterus. Okay, the inner layer is called the myometrium. Okay, cervical canal, this little piece of tissue right there is the cervix, and it's this narrow opening in, and then there's the vaginal canal. All right, so that's that. Ultimately, everything has a purpose. The vagina is for intercourse and it's a birthing canal. The external genitalia is straightforward. The labia majora, minora, the clitoris, the vagina, the urethral opening, and that's that. Okay, so ultimately the female reproductive system is designed to support pregnancy and to make a baby. Okay, so let's see. Now, we're going to talk about the menstrual cycle, which consists of 2 cycles, the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle. Okay, now the ovarian cycle, this is happening in the ovaries. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at that real quick. There's the ovaries. And there's days that show us exactly when and how and what's going on in the ovaries. Okay, so there's day 1 through all the way through day 11. Okay, see how there's basically, this is an egg, an oocyte, and it's gone through meiosis and now it's growing, and it's inside of a follicle and it's growing and becoming more and more mature. And then when it ruptures out, that is ovulation day. Okay, now the rest of it is basically regenerating. So this leftover, all of this stuff, the tissue or the capsule where the egg ruptured out during ovulation, what's left over is called the corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum will starts to regress, and then it starts all over again. Okay, so, and if you look closely at this figure, there is a direct connection with hormones and the cycle. Okay, so ovulation on that day, this is right there. Notice the spike right before ovulation day in the hormones, LH and FSH, and then finally the rupturing happens, and then the hormones kind of go back. They go back to normal. Okay, the uterine cycle. Okay, so now we're talking about all of what we just discussed is all happening in the ovary. Meanwhile, in the uterus, at the same time, there is other things occurring. The endometrial lining, and that is changing. And that's the main thing. Okay, the endometrial lining of the uterus is going to change. So this is, let's go ahead and start with day 1. So the lining sheds during menstruation. Okay, and so we're talking about a 28 to 30 day cycle. Okay, so these early days of menstruation, the the lining, the thickness is not very thick. Okay, and this is actually, see how it's dropped? That's the shedding. All right, now during proliferation, proliferation means, you know, is replication. It's getting thicker and thicker and thicker, and then it's going to get super, super, super thick. Okay, see how thick that is? Why would it do that? Well, it's getting thicker and thicker and thicker to make a place for the baby. And it's getting ready for a baby. And then if no baby comes, then we go to the menstruation phase, which is right here. And what happens is all this tissue is going to be shed and released, which is technically menstruation, and that is the blood that comes out. Okay, so this is a closer look at the ovarian cycle, and you are welcome to review it again. This just gives you a closer look at what's happening exactly in regards to the oocyte and ovulation day and the corpus luteum, which is left over, and all that. All right, so again, this is kind of just wrapping what we just said up. Menstruation is in day 1 through 5. What's important to note here is the levels of estrogen are down. Okay, now when the endometrial lining is going to start proliferating, you'll see an increase in estrogen, then actually drops down again, up again during the secretory phase, right? And then progesterone is kind of, it's not on the same track. It's right behind it, it seems like, okay, in there. So during the proliferation days, but ultimately they're both elevated at this point. Proliferation days are from 6 to 13, estrogen and progesterone go up, endometrial lining thickens. Okay, again, no baby, the endometrial lining degenerates or degrades, and menstruation happens. Okay, so ovulation day is day 13, day 14, officially day 14 according to our textbook. And the secretory phase way back here is from day 15 to 28. And this is when the corpus luteum is produced. Progesterone and the corpus luteum produces progesterone and estrogen. The endometrial layer is going to thicken. Okay. The uterine gland will mature. The uterus is prepared to accept and nourish and fertilize the egg. No egg, no baby. Shed the lining and menstruation, and then it happens again. And guess who has control over everything? You guessed it, the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary gland, and they are directly in charge of regulating these hormones. So this is actually interesting. The hypothalamus releases GnRH. Well, we've seen that before. Okay, it's also going to instruct the anterior pituitary gland to release LH. We've seen that before as well, but this time it's acting on the ovaries in the female body. LH is going to instruct the production of estrogen, testosterone, and they will self-regulate through a negative feedback loop by acting on either the hypothalamus or the anterior pituitary gland. There's the oocyte rupturing out, okay, because the GnRH instructs the anterior pituitary gland to also release FSH, and this one's going to act on the follicle. This is the follicle stimulating hormone. So it's directly involved in all of this. So it's going to be involved in ovulation. Okay, estrogen regulates itself as well by acting on the pituitary gland and or the hypothalamus. All right, so let's talk about diseases of the reproductive system. Now, the most common ones and the most problematic ones worldwide are STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. Now, there's different types of STDs. There are bacterial STDs, viral, and other. Bacterial, the most common are gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydia. There's a couple of pictures there of gonorrhea and syphilis. This is probably the worst case of syphilis anyone's ever taken a picture of anyways. Now, the good thing about this is bacteria is treatable. We can give antibiotics. There's nothing great about any of it, right? But the fact is that giving someone an antibiotic treatment can cure these. Now, though, we know there's a strain of antibiotic-resistant gonorrhea. That's scary. The issue with viruses. Viruses are going to lead to things like HIV, hepatitis B, genital herpes, HPV, which can lead to cervical cancer. We now have, we've actually had it for quite a while. We have a pap smear test, which is designed to test for cervical cancer. So it's a screening. Of course, everybody kind of knows what that is, but it's designed to screen for cervical cancer. It's one of the very few screenings that we actually have for cancers. All right, now, the problem with viruses is that we don't have cures for viruses. We have medications that can kind of, try to suppress the virus and things like that, but we have no cure for viruses. Remember, no cure for viruses. They don't exist at all. All we can do is try to come up with vaccines, and they are currently working on an HIV vaccine right now. They've been working on it for a long time. Okay, now something other aside from bacteria and viruses, there's other things that can cause disease. There's yeast infections, and then there's protists. There are protists that can cause disease, like Trichomonas vagicalis, and then there's arthropods. That is technically pubic lice, which is technically crabs. All right, so if you're interested in HIV, you can go ahead and go through the rest of this lecture on your own. I've talked about it before. HIV and AIDS is a very interesting disorder. And as you guys very well know, we've actually already seen this information before, but this is definitely for you guys to review on your own. And ultimately, as you very well know, we don't have a cure for HIV, and we do have the cocktail. So now people that are infected with HIV are no longer given a death sentence. They are now being treated, but they are still HIV positive. Okay, that is the end of chapter 21.